It started with silence, the kind that fills a Senate chamber just before something unpredictable happens. Everyone expected a routine exchange, but what unfolded between Senator Peter Welch and Attorney General Pam Bondi turned into one of the sharpest confrontations of the year. Welch didn't raise his voice, he didn't grandstand. He simply refused to let spin replace substance. And within seconds, the calm surface of the hearing cracked wide open. Welch began softly, almost disarmingly. He thanked Bondi, nodded respectfully, and then dropped a story that hit like a gut punch. A Vermont family, a husband and wife in their 50s, raising 3 kids, one battling acute leukemia, had just received notice that their healthcare premiums would triple because of the government shutdown. You could feel the room tighten. Welch wasn't playing politics. He was putting a human face on the chaos.
Shut down the government.
Let me
That's
be clear.
one of the sticking points, and I don't know if you voted
All right, well,
for that or not.
this actually is important to all of us, and the lament I have is that if this health care goes away, this premium support, it is really going to hurt families in red states and blue states. And in Vermont, I mean, we voted Democratic, but we have a lot of good folks who voted for President Trump, and their health care is jeopardized. And there's a November 1 deadline that is coming up. And the reason I'm saying this is that I think it's important for us to try to work out together a resolution that's going to be beneficial to people you care about in Florida and voted for President Trump, and people I care about in Vermont who voted in some cases for Vice President Harris and some for President Trump. So it's not just Democrats not wanting to negotiate. And in fact, we do want to negotiate, and that's why I'd encourage the president to encourage my colleagues on the Republican side to sit down with us and try to see if we can make some progress. Another topic, with the respect to voting rights in the letter that your voting rights chief sent out, we got one in Vermont, and it's a demand to get all the information on the voting file. And in that letter, or in the announcement of that letter, the chief indicated an apprehension about the voting process being taken over by, quote, the left. Now, do you have any information with respect to Vermont about a takeover of the voting process by, quote, the left?
Senator, I'm not familiar with what you're referring to. We are currently involved in voter roll lawsuits in 6 states. Is that what you're referring to?
No, there's a letter that went out demanding that states, including Vermont, provide all the voting file information,
Right.
includes personal information. But when that letter was sent out,
That's perfectly legal.
but there was an assertion by the chief in this division that this was to deal with the fact that the voting process has been taken over by the left. So we got one of those letters in Vermont. And my question to you is, what do you mean by the left? And do you have any evidence that the so-called system has been overtaken by the left?
We must have fair and free elections.
No, I know that. But I'm asking for the specific basis.
And we will have fair and free elections in this country.
Okay,
Senator, I'd be happy to talk to my chief. Who was it? Who said that?
It was your chief, which I assume you would know who that is. Here's the question here, okay? There is a point of view that is in dispute here about the fairness of elections. But you have the power as the as the Attorney General to use the authority of your office to make demands on states. And you did that with Vermont. That's within your right to do it. I'm not disputing your legal authority to do it.
Is Vermont disputing turning over the information to our office?
Vermont is. The Secretary of State is. And you can resolve that with her.
And we have every right to have that information,
yeah, here's
Senator.
where I'm going.
Why wouldn't they want to turn it
You're
over?
a prosecutor with the awesome authority to make the decision that you're going to start an investigation against the state or against an individual. And I know from your experience as a county prosecutor and as the Attorney General in Florida, you took seriously that obligation to have a factual basis before you'd proceed, right?
Senator, I take that role. I take my oath very seriously.
All right, so what I'm
and I
asking-
take fair and free elections in this
No,
country
we
very
all-
seriously.
we all
and that
do.
information, our office is entitled to have that information.
But
And we
the
are
question
involved
here-
in litigation on that. And I
Here's the
assume we'll be
question
involved
I
in
have.
litigation with
We have-
Vermont.
We have a Republican governor in Vermont. We had our former Republican governor was was the treasurer for many years, and also the Secretary of State with election responsibility. What I'm asking is, do you or does your head of this voting section have any factual basis that you can point to that justifies your demand that Vermont turn over all this confidential voting rights information?
Well, it would remain confidential with my office, and you just said that you have a Republican governor, so it doesn't make sense what you just said. We've asked that of every state, Senator.
Right, and I'm asking about Vermont and what the factual basis is, but we can move on. You've mentioned that you can't discuss pending litigation, and I think the committee by and large accepted that answer. But I did notice that you spoke at great length about pending litigation, specifically with respect to the questions Senator Cruz asked you about the sentencing of the Kavanaugh defendant. That's pending, right?
He was sentenced to 8 years.
I understand that, but that's on appeal, right?
We will be appealing.
Right, so that makes it pending litigation. So you made an exception with respect to
No.
the Cruz questions.
Hold on. No,
but you
those
didn't
were-
answer
those were
any of the
things-
questions that you said were pending at litigation from any of my colleagues.
Those were facts that came out at the sentencing hearing. You're welcome to see the transcript of the sentencing hearing
I
with all
understand
the
that.
gruesome details of what they threatened to do to Justice Kavanaugh and other justices.
I condemn what that person did.
That was the sentencing.
But the point here is that that's pending litigation. You indicated you're going to be appealing. It's your right to do that. And you would not, you use that justification to not answer many other questions.
Justification, you're an attorney, Senator.
Okay.
You realize that.
I do want to go back to Homan. There's a tape, right, with Mr. Homan? I mean, first of all, is there a tape that has audio and video of the transfer of the $50,000?
You would have to talk to Director Patel about that.
No, I'm talking to you.
I don't know the answer,
Yeah,
Senator.
you do know the answer to that.
Don't call me a liar.
I didn't call you a liar.
You just said I know the answer. I said I don't know the answer.
Well,
You have to talk to
okay, let
Director
me-
Patel. What I said is that
Let me
investigation
put it
was
another way.
closed.
If you don't know, why don't you know whether there was a tape and video?
Senator, I believe that was resolved prior to my confirmation as Attorney General.
Do you think that it is of public interest for the people to know what happened to the $50,000 that the FBI turned over to Homan?
Did you hear what I just said? That was resolved prior to my confirmation as Attorney General. That's why I said I would not know.
It's not resolved. There's $50,000. Homan has it, or somebody has it. Do you have no interest in knowing where it is?
You're not going to sit here and slander Tom Homan. The FBI and Deputy Director Blanche said there was nothing.
I'm not slamming Tom Homan. He got the $50,000.
Tom Homan is doing, how do you know that? Tom Homan is doing a great job, as our borders are, keeping your border state safe. You're a border state.
Thank you, Senator Welch. We're going to
Madam President, could I have
not right
1
now.
minute?
Not right now. At the end,
On a
if you wait, we'll
point of
talk about
personal
it.
privilege?
Not right now. There,
The
Senator
witness-
Tillis and many others have been waiting their turn.
I know,
So
but this
you
is
can
1
hold
minute,
until
and
the
it
end.
relates to testimony that she gave
No,
about me.
Senator Tillis, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Their child has leukemia, he said, voice steady. They're terrified they'll lose coverage by November 1st. It was the kind of moment that slices through the noise and reminds everyone why these hearings are supposed to matter. But instead of empathy, Bondi went for deflection. She didn't address the family. She didn't talk about cancer or costs. She blamed the shutdown on Democrats, accusing them of wanting health care for illegal aliens. You could almost hear the disbelief ripple across the room. Welch blinked, leaned forward, and calmly reframed it. This isn't about party, it's about people. Families in red states and blue states are suffering the same way. His tone never broke, but his words carried a weight that made everyone listen. This isn't about who you voted for, he said. It's about whether your kids can see a doctor. The tension was real now. Welch wasn't just questioning policy. He was challenging the entire framework of Bondi's argument. He appealed to cooperation, urging both sides to sit down and make progress. But Bondi's response stayed locked on talking points. You could sense where it was heading. Welch was done playing along. He shifted gears, and the hearing suddenly moved from healthcare to something even more explosive. That's when he brought up the letters. Bondi's Justice Department had sent them to multiple states, including his own Vermont, demanding full voter file data, names, addresses, personal information, all under the claim of protecting election integrity. Welch didn't deny that the Attorney General had the legal right to request it. What he questioned was the motive. He read aloud a statement from Bondi's voting rights chief, who said the purpose was to address a takeover of the voting process by the left. The phrase hung heavy in the air. Welch asked point-blank, "Do you have any factual evidence of that?" Bondi paused, shifted in her seat. "I'm not familiar with what you're referring to," she said. Her voice was steady, but the dodge was obvious. Welch pressed again. "We got one of those letters in Vermont," he said. "So I'm asking you, what do you mean by the left, and what evidence do you have?" It was the kind of moment hearings are built for. Direct, simple, impossible to spin. Bondi leaned on procedure. "We are involved in voter roll lawsuits in 6 states," she replied, trying to blur the line between routine investigation and political targeting. Welch didn't budge. "No, I'm asking about Vermont," he clarified. "About your demand for confidential information and the claim that elections have been taken over." She still wouldn't answer. "Instead," she said, "our office has every right to that information and will be involved in litigation with Vermont." Welch didn't flinch. "We have a Republican governor," he reminded her. "Our former Republican Secretary of State handled elections for years with integrity. So I'll ask again, what's the factual basis for this claim?" Bondi shot back. "It doesn't make sense what you just said. We've asked every state, not just Vermont." It was pure circular defense, procedure over substance. Welch let the words hang, then moved in for precision. He reminded her of her past as a prosecutor, someone who should never open an investigation without evidence. "You took that obligation seriously once," he said quietly. "Do you still?" She said she did. She swore she took her oath seriously. But by now, the hearing had turned. The audience could sense that Welch wasn't just after an answer. He was exposing the performance itself. Then came the pivot that made everyone sit up. Welch noted that throughout the day, Bondi had refused to answer several questions by claiming pending litigation. But moments earlier, when Senator Cruz asked her about the Kavanaugh case, also pending, she had spoken at length, describing gruesome details from the sentencing. Welch pointed out the contradiction. "You made an exception there," he said. "Why not here?" Bondi's response was razor defensive. "Those were facts that came out at the sentencing hearing," she snapped. "You can read the transcript." Welch wasn't buying it. "But that case is still on appeal," he said. "It's pending." She cut him off. "You're an attorney, Senator. You know what that means." The exchange turned cold. For the first time, Bondi's composure cracked slightly. Welch didn't push the tone, he pushed the logic. "So you choose when to apply the rule?" he asked. The silence after was sharper than any shout, but the calm didn't last. What came next was the moment that would replay across social media for days. Welch leaned in again. "Let's talk about Homan," he said. "There's been mention of a tape, audio and video, showing the transfer of $50,000. Is that true?" The room went still. Even staffers froze mid-note. Bondi blinked, glanced down, and said, "You would have to talk to Director Patel about that." Welch didn't move. "No," he said, "I'm talking to you." She hesitated. "I don't know the answer." Welch's tone hardened. "You do know the answer," he said. And that's when Bondi snapped. "Don't call me a liar," she fired back. The air cracked. You could practically hear cameras clicking. Welch stayed calm. "I didn't call you a liar," he said evenly. "I said you know the answer." Bondi doubled down. "That was resolved before my confirmation," she said quickly, trying to close the door. Welch didn't let her. "It's not resolved," he countered. "There's still $50,000 missing. Someone has it. Doesn't the public deserve to know where it went?" Bondi's tone flared. "You're not going to sit here and slander Tom Homan. The FBI and Deputy Director Blanche said there was nothing." Welch shot back. "I'm not slandering anyone. I'm asking where the money is." The exchange ended abruptly, the moderator stepping in before it could explode further. But the damage was done. The clip was already destined to go viral. That moment was more than personal friction. It symbolized something bigger. Welch had peeled back the layers of official defensiveness that define modern politics. Bondi's strategy, deflect, deny, and redirect, was on full display. But Welch had turned each deflection into evidence of the very problem he was exposing: the refusal to take accountability. Every time she shifted blame or hid behind pending litigation, the contrast between responsibility and rhetoric grew sharper. And by the time they reached that final standoff over the $50,000, the audience didn't need an explanation. They understood exactly what he was showing them. Even after the exchange was cut off, Welch's words carried a tone that outlived the moment. He circled back to the beginning, to the family in Vermont, to the reason this hearing existed at all. Real families, he said quietly, are paying the price for political games. The line wasn't theatrical, it was exhausted truth. The cameras caught Bondi's still face, unreadable, while Welch spoke. He didn't gloat. He just said what needed to be said. Leadership means finding answers, not excuses. The room was still. The moderator called the next senator, but the energy had changed. Welch had done what hearings rarely do anymore: made the stakes human again. For all the shouting and politics, his closing message cut deeper than the confrontation itself. The government shutdown wasn't just headlines or statistics. It was people terrified of losing health care, workers going unpaid, and trust eroding in every direction. Later, journalists would write about the heated exchange, but those who watched it live knew it wasn't just heat, it was clarity. Welch didn't win a fight, he forced a reckoning. He reminded the chamber that politics without compassion is just theater, and that accountability without honesty is impossible. And yet, beyond the spectacle, one question lingered like a shadow. What really happened to that $50,000? Was there a tape? Why did the mention of it rattle the room so completely? None of that was answered, at least not that day. But maybe that was the point. Welch wasn't promising closure. He was demanding transparency. As the session closed and microphones powered down, the audience buzzed. Some saw a bold stand. Others saw a trap skillfully laid. But everyone agreed on one thing. This wasn't the routine political back and forth they expected. It was something rawer, something that felt closer to truth than talking points. Outside the chamber, cameras caught Welch walking past reporters without stopping. One shouted a question about Bondi's reaction. He didn't answer, just said quietly, "We'll see." The clips circulated online within hours, racking up millions of views. Commenters called it everything from a masterclass in restraint to the moment the mask slipped. And perhaps that's exactly what made it resonate. Not outrage for outrage's sake, but confrontation grounded in reality. A senator forcing the most powerful prosecutor in the country to face her own contradictions, and doing it without theatrics. In an era when politics often feels like performance, Welch's approach was something else entirely. He didn't shout. He didn't grandstand. He let facts and silence do the work. And that, ironically, made it hit harder than any viral speech. So when you watch that clip again, the quiet tone, the steady questions, the breaking point over $50,000, remember what it really showed. Not just a clash of personalities, but a clash of values. Between those who answer and those who avoid. Between those who serve and those who spin. And that's the real story behind this hearing. If you believe accountability still matters, if you think honesty should outlast headlines, then make sure you're subscribed. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you found this breakdown revealing, and stay tuned, because the next hearing might just expose something even bigger.